My name is Dr. Marion Gibbon. I'm the Assistant Director of Public Health at Birmingham City Council. And what I'm going to be talking about with you all is about community research. And I think this is a really important programme that we're just initiating. And I'm really looking forward to having your involvement in it. So what do I mean by the words community research? How Strand defines it is that community-based research takes place in community settings and involves community members in the design and implementation of research projects, demonstrates respect for the contributions of success that are made by community partners, as well as respect for the principle of doing no harm to the communities involved. Now, this is one definition, but I think there are others, and what I feel is that we need to consider more than just what Strand is telling us. Because what community research is something that starts in the community with members of that community being researchers and looking at issues that they affect them and what they want to know more about. Then, after they've decided on what they want to look at, they make a plan to how they're going to investigate it. And once they've got those findings from what the issues that they're discussing, they then look to develop actions that address those issues. So it really comes from the community themselves. They know their strengths, they know their problems, and they are completely aware of the characteristics of the community that they're part of, and making sure that those are considered when the action plans are developed. But what is one of the things that's really difficult to kind of define is what a community is and what does community mean. One of the things that Toby Lowe has kind of made a statement of is that a community is a group of people who form an identity-forming narrative. So this means that communities don't just have to be place-based, in that I'm part of the community of a particular part of Birmingham. That's one of the things that communities can be. But there's also elements of that you can be part of a special characteristic within a community, so that you might define yourself in a different way, and that is important. Or you form a part of a group. Like I enjoy dance, and so I have a community that is a dance community. I also like to sing, so I have a community that is my singing community. So you can be part of more than one community. I am of the community of public health professionals. So just to suggest that there's more than one definition of community, and that you'll be looking to see what your thoughts are on community. But within a community, we have to look at what's going on. And so as I defined at the beginning, that one of the aspects of looking at what's going on in a community is understanding their needs and having an understanding of the health problems that a particular community faces and what their causes are, and then anything else that affects the well-being of that community. And it's all to do with what the people present feel to be their biggest problems and needs, and that it starts from defining things from the perspective of the community that you're working with. Within the community, there are also social factors to be considered. And some of the social factors that you can look at are the beliefs within that community, some of the customs they have, and some of the habits that might affect health. We also know that hierarchies in terms of social structures can affect health, and understanding how culture influences health and well-being is really important. who's the most important within the community, the ways in which each members relate to each other. And the final part is about power. Who is it who has the control of whom and what? And all of these are quite crucial to understand when we're looking at community needs and assets. So we also want to know about the resources within a community, because a community has lots that they can do to support themselves. So that anybody with a particular special skill is a resource. You might have lots of different community assets, the different employment possibilities, how much work is available and what nature of work, whether it's work that is beneficial to health or some of the work that's undertaken is certainly not, and how we get around from place to place. All of those things are aspects of the resources within communities, and things like green and white and blue spaces as well. When we are considering what we're going to do and how we gather information and insights from a community, I want to stress a few things from this, which will then go on into how we plan together of what we're going to do. Listening from our heart is really important. Listening with our whole selves, not with our minds, but kind of what's going on. You can often feel within yourself when you know that something is really important. Make it the observations that you make, because one of the things about communication and dialogue is that 80% of it is nothing to do with the words that are spoken. It's to do with the body language and how people are reacting to each other. Those are really key. So that being able to observe closely. And if your words and your actions are not in alignment with each other, people will know. They know that you can't be trusted. And for us to be able to work in effective collaborative partnerships, we need to be able to build trusting relationships that consider the power dynamics. We coming in from outsiders are often much more powerful than those within the community. And how do we change that? It's really important. We need to be able to see ourselves on an equal footing. We try and bring, as a member of a statutory organisation, we often try and bring our priorities to a conversation without listening to the priorities of those that we're interacting with. So it's an important consideration. I learn so much from when I go and do work within a community, and I want to be able to make sure that we make this a learning experience for everyone that's involved in it. Now, when we go on to listening, one of the things that I really like is what Zeno Osatium said. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And if you consider that means we should listen twice as much as we open our mouths and talk. And I think that's a good place that we can consider. I came across Sharma's work around different levels of listening, and I think this is quite important to us. So one of the first things, when you're meeting up with a bunch of friends and you might be in a very stressful situation and somebody's narrating what's going on in their lives, so you're just listening to download. It's not at a very in-depth level at all. It's just a superficial level. The next level of listening is about what are the facts of the matter? So we need to understand what's going on, so that this is using our brain more than our hearts. So we're listening for the facts of the matter, what the evidence is in relation to a particular topic. And that's important. But when we're really wanting to work more closely with people, we have to be able to listen as if we're in their shoes, which is a more empathic listening. So the third level of listening that Sharma mentioned in his work is that of empathic listening. And what we want to try and get to in our work is that of the field 4 generative listening, so that we are listening in order to be able to create something together, to collaborate more effectively, to have an effective partnership and collaboration. And so I will be doing some activities with you that enable you to consider these types of listening and what's going on. And why this is important is that you're going to be going into the field, as it were, to have conversations. So before we meet up again, you'll be looking at having some conversations within your communities. And I want you to be able to consider the conversations and the level of the conversation, so that you get a truly depthful conversation. So that instead of just listening to download and maintain a relationship, and that you go beyond just the facts of the matter, that you want to really find out more, so that you go. So field 1 listening is just downloading and maintaining. Then the field 2 is just about finding the facts and being able to debate the pros and cons of things, this or that, and what makes it better. But that level of conversation is all around the head, and what a fairly superficial level of conversation. And what I'm wanting you to do is really get underneath with finding out some of the feelings and what really matters to people, so that when you have a conversation, it will be one of inquiry and being able to go beneath, so that those conversations will be able to clarify what's going on, and you'll be able to come back with a fuller picture of what's going on, in order for us to be able to have a more in-depth conversation about, and in looking at, well, what is it that needs to change? How are we going to create the basis for the change to happen in the community? So we'll be looking at those conversations around, what difference is this going to make? What would you like to see happen? What's the best thing that could happen? What evidence do you have from elsewhere that would be helpful to bring to this conversation? So the importance of questioning and the way you do your questions is key to being a good researcher. Curiosity and inquiry require us to ask open-ended questions, because it's those kinds of questions that allow someone to give an answer that's expansive, that widens things up rather than closes them down, so that you can facilitate a dialogue and a story to be told through using open-ended questions. And if you end up using closed questions, which are the ones where you ask a question in such a way that somebody either says yes or no, where you've got a series of parts to a question, as you would have in a survey, where there's an answer that can be A, B or C, or all of the above. You can see how that kind of question just closes things down. It doesn't enable that inquiry to take place and to find out what's really going on beneath the surface, beneath the veneer. And so what you end up with is superficial answers and responses. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for getting to the nub of it, to find out what's really going on, to an understanding that's more clear. And so that's kind of the reasoning I want to share a bit with you about what I mean by open and closed questions. Now I'm going to take you back to a time when I was doing my doctoral research, and I used a form of research called participatory action research. This also is concerned with who holds the power and tries to get to a situation where the dynamic around the power is much more equal. But it's not very easy to do. And where I was doing my research was in Nepal. So I also had added difficulty around the language, use of language. My Nepalese was pretty okay, but not to get to a really in-depth understanding. So what I ended up doing was training some community members from Britain Nepal Medical Trust who work closely in different underserved communities in Nepal, in how they might undertake that form of research. And so we spent a kind of several days together learning about these different kinds of methodologies. And I first of all sat through a training where I was very quiet because it was all in Nepalese, but the trainer was superb, and I learnt such a lot from him. And I then asked him if he would come to the village where I was living in eastern Nepal, and he was willing to do so. And also at that time, we also had the opportunity that Robert Chambers came to that area of Nepal as well, and he ended up staying. And Robert Chambers is one of the gurus of community development and this form of participatory action research. So it was fantastic to have him there as well. So the work that I was doing with the communities in Nepal, you can see depicted in this picture. We used to sit on the ground together, and the women would take the pen and draw what was going on, where their problems were. They'd map out all their houses, show which house families had gardens. And one day we were discussing about how the body worked, because the culture is very different and the health beliefs in Nepal are quite different from that of the West. And so their drawing of a body map really enabled me to get to understand how they viewed what went on in their world. We discussed about pregnancy and how they believed that contraception worked. When a baby got sick due to diarrhea, what it was that caused that to happen. We'd look at when the illnesses were greatest over the course of the year, as we drew out things across the different seasons. The women would bring their babies and we'd sit together. They might sing songs some days as well. That was part of the way in which they told their stories. So many things I learned of working with these groups of women. They made me feel so welcome, and they taught me so much. And now I'm hoping that through this sharing with you, that I too will be able to share my love of working in communities on a level that considers what the resources that they have available to them and what they can do for themselves. So some of these women were from very poor circumstances, and yet they did so much and managed to make real change and to improve their health. And I envisage what we're doing and the work we're setting out on is going to do the same.